Hi, and welcome back to this week's episode of Materials for Adolescence Book Talk. I'm this week's host, Sarah Despain, and I am going to be covering the theme of murder. So, this might seem like a bit of an unusual topic, but you may have noticed over the last several years, true crime has become almost like a global phenomenon. People have become increasingly more interested in serial killers, murder, true crime of all sorts, and they're listening and reading things through different formats. There are podcasts now, there are books, there are documentaries. There are so many different avenues where you can explore this particular theme. So, with this huge following, I have decided to review three very different novels that all have that one theme in common: murder. The very first book that we're going to be exploring is Killing November by Adriana Mathers. The second book will be Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. And last but not least will be My Friend Dahmer by Derf Backderf. One thing I do want to just remind you is that all three of these books do have some content that might be triggering for you. They all deal with murder in very different ways, so viewers and listener discretion is advised. The first book that we're looking at, like I mentioned, is Killing November by the number one New York Times bestselling author Adriana Mathers. And this book actually follows around the main character. Her name is November Adley, and she is sent to a secretive boarding school by her father called the Academy of Absconditi. You may be wondering what absconditi means. Well, it is actually the Latin term for hidden. So this hidden academy is very different from what a normal school would be like. They do not have internet access. They do not have electricity. They do not have the ability to communicate with anyone outside of the academy. And they have a kind of archaic, old school way of punishing people. So think along the lines of like Hammurabi, where it's an eye for an eye. This school is very different, and that means the students are also going to be very different. All of the students were specially selected because they aspire to be future assassins or spies or master impersonators. So this doesn't look like, again, your classic school. They don't have math, reading, gym class, social studies, science, nothing like that. The classes here include dagger throwing, knife throwing, poisons, and the art of deception, which leaves November really kind of wondering, why am I here? And that thought alone has her kind of starting to question the identity of her parents. Why was she sent there? Why was it not safe for her to stay home with her parents? And she's trying to kind of navigate through this new life of a new school, making new friends, having new classes, just going through kind of big life changing moments. And it doesn't stop there. For November, her and her new friends actually they uncover a body because there was a murder on campus. So, because November was there to locate and find the body, she's kind of put into questioning of, is she responsible? Is she the murderer? So November in this book, you kind of follow her along through her journey to one, try to find out who is the murderer, and two, to avoid being the next murder victim. Um, I mean, this book in itself is wow, just what a very interesting premise. It's very fast paced. It's something that I would consider to be a thriller, suspense, mystery. So if you're interested in any of those kinds of books, I would say go ahead, put on your Sherlock Holmes hat, and try to help November solve this mystery. One thing I will say to keep in mind is that, again, there are going to be violent themes present in the book, so this is kind of your warning for reader discretion to be advised. The second book that we're going to be looking at is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. So, if you haven't had the opportunity to read a verse novel yet, this is really going to be your chance to experience something very different and very unique. So, verse novels are books told through the narrative of poetry. So, when you hear poetry, some of you might be thinking, not poetry. Others of you might really love poetry, but no matter where you fall on that scale, you are going to really enjoy this unique novel. It is fast paced, it is engaging. Um, it is actually a story following 15-year-old Will after he discovers that his older brother Sean was murdered. Um, Will is going through, obviously, a very wide array of emotions finding out that his brother was murdered, but he is set on seeking and getting revenge on the person who killed him. So Will decides to take his brother's gun and he sets out to find his brother Sean's murderer. So on Will's journey, he actually finds himself in an elevator and he is met by various ghosts of his brother Sean's past. Each person or ghost ends up explaining kind of their story to Will and giving him kind of a bigger picture of what Sean's life was like and how he ended up in the place that he was in. Um, One major theme of this book is gun violence. So, even though we're talking about murder, gun violence was something that Jason Reynolds really brings up and brings great awareness to because this is a really hot topic in the United States over the last several years. It's really important to read from the perspective of an African American male living in the United States experiencing gun violence. So, I really, really appreciated this particular novel. Um, you might be wondering, hey, does Will get his revenge? Is justice served? But you'll have to read The Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds to find out. I would also really recommend giving this title a try as an audiobook. So the author, Jason Reynolds, is the narrator, which really allows you to hear and experience the book just as the author intended. The third and final book we're looking at is the graphic novel My Friend Dahmer by Durf Backderf. So, Durf Backderf is actually a high school friend, I'm going to say friend, of the notorious serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. So, if you are not familiar with Jeffrey Dahmer, then let me really warn you now before you start searching online. But his crimes are very, very disturbing and terribly gruesome. I would not recommend doing any outside research if you are triggered by violent true crime. You can find out a lot about Jeffrey Dahmer online. You can find a lot out in books, movies, all those types of things. But you cannot really find anything about Jeffrey Dahmer from the perspective of a high school friend before Jeffrey committed his crimes. So one thing that I really enjoyed about this graphic novel outside of the illustrations is that it provides that unique perspective of someone who knew Jeffrey Dahmer before he committed his crimes. I think that's a really unique perspective and also kind of creepy. Can you imagine if you were friends with someone in high school and you later find out they're one of the most notorious serial killers of the United States? So it's very, very different. Um, the graphic novel doesn't really portray a lot of violence, so if you are triggered by that, it is still okay for you to give it a try. Basically portrays Jeffrey as a kind of shy kid that grew into this really goofy teenager that suppressed some violent urges through alcohol and acting out with his classmates. So this is a nonfiction graphic novel, and it's almost kind of like an autobiography being from a friend's point of view, but if you want to learn more about Jeffrey Dahmer and the mind of a serial killer, then I really recommend giving My Friend Dahmer by Durf Backderf a try. It's a quick read, and it was actually also made into a film that you can watch on Amazon Prime. So, are you feeling spooked yet? Because all three of these novels had that one thing in common, which was murder. Something that I really loved about this theme is and all of these choices is that they showcase murder in very different ways. So whether you like fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, or verse novels, there's something here that everyone can enjoy and everyone could kind of give a try. But thanks for tuning in to this semester's book talk, Materials for Adolescents. Keep calm and don't get murdered.